Hello, my name is Desmond Lynch. I'm 26 years old and I'm a filmmaker. This is a special behind the scenes audio commentary episode on a production of my short film, SHOWTIME. In this episode, I'm interviewing editor Mercer Hughes. Mercer edited the short film and was also the boom op during production. Without further ado, let's begin. Hello, my name is Desmond Lynch. I'm 26 years old and I'm a filmmaker. I'm here interviewing a special guest, and that leads me into our first question. Who are you and what do you do?
Hello. Well, I'm Mercer. I'm also a filmmaker, and I have quite a broad set of interests in film and departments and specialisms. But for Showtime, I was working with you, Des, as a boom operator on set, and then I edited the film in post in collaboration with you.
Yeah, and I think broad spectrum doesn't really do it justice. So you do camera stuff, you do sound stuff, you do editing, you can sing and dance as well. Yeah, like he's far from one trick pony, I'll give you that.
It's very generous.
Quadruple threat, maybe. Yeah, I was thinking because like doing this stuff, I'm thinking like, okay, how did we meet and how did stuff like that happen? I think we met through our mutual friend Sean McConville, and I was the sound person for his web series Pastor Ed, and I think I heard like a lot of good things about you on the production, and me being like a petty little fuck, I was like, oh, Mercer can't be that good. No, I'm probably better than him. And I met you in person, and I was like, oh, this dude's great. What the fuck? And So I remember, I did ask, like during that entire thing, like they always insisted on doing these like really big wide shots, and they always bugged the hell out of me because I didn't have that much sound gear at the time. I only had like a boom mic, and I was like, dude, like I can't do wide shots. You're gonna have a rough time with that stuff. And I remember there's one day where I think we were shooting one of the episodes, and like you just so happened to be on that day. And I remember like at one point like it's another wide shot, and I remember I was having issues, and like you said like, Des, don't worry about it. We're gonna get a clean plate now, and then like you can just put the mic wherever the fuck you want. Because you didn't swear, but like you like, because you don't swear, but like I'll just like edit it. I'll just edit it out in post, which I didn't know you could do that up until that point. I was like, oh dude, that would have saved me so much stress. Because there was one point like on Pastor Ed, I had to hold a boom like right over my head for like 20 minutes straight. Yeah, it was not fun. It's always like cheap mics and like the cheap boom poles, and the cheaper the boom pole, the heavier it is. I don't know if anyone ever tells you that. So yeah, now that he's a real one for that. I remember like you were like pretty happy with like the song for Pastor Ed as well, because I think like you had a rough time editing some of the song for Sean's previous projects, just because it was good to meet you there, and it's good to work with you again.
It's always a pleasure to edit something you've done the sound for, especially a couple of things Sean's done, it was, this project's also quite interesting for the sound and edit collaboration as well. I'm sure we'll get on to.
100%. Our next question is, what made you interested in coming on board for Showtime?
So yes, we'd just really worked together on Sean's things before. I don't think we'd worked together on a project.
We'd only just worked with Sean's things, and I borrowed one of your main recorder for a short film I did once. And I think that's like when we proper bonded, because we were talking about sound stuff. So like, oh, you know this sound person? I know a sound person. We were talking about like YouTube videos we watch, and like the things we read up on, and like the websites we go to. And I think like we're just bonding over that, which is very fun. You showed me how to work the Zoom H4n, the recorder, which is really, really, really good recorder. I actually have like a newer version of that right now, and I'm recording this interview using that. So
yes,
good equipment.
The trusty F8.
Trusty F8.
Yes. So you asked me anyway initially to come on to Boom. Which was, it's always, as that's quite a stressful job, because I know that's something you've got a lot of interest in doing yourself, and you're proficient enough in it that you'd be looking you'd be looking at whoever's booming for you, like sort of judging that role. So that was a lot of pressure to come on to do.
Yeah.
So that's a fun challenge. But also to edit it. And I think, well, as you pitched it to me, it was quite an interesting project stylistically. It had a lot of fourth wall breaking elements, and it was sort of it was a big soliloquy from this main character who does this running commentary from start to finish. And I thought that was quite a fun premise, and it had the project had this real sense of direction and flow through space as the story progresses. I think, and you had really kind of well pre-visualized everything, and you had storyboards ready to show to me from an early stage to go, okay, here's how the edit's going to work. And you had this kind of clever plan of, we've got 3 different rooms here, and we're going to and they're all different in the house, and we're going to join them together through the edit and like through the shooting. And I thought that was brilliant, because I love that kind of thing where you really manipulate the space and you create a whole new world, a whole new set of rooms, and like it really works in this flow of the story.
So there was 4 like rooms we pretty much shot in for that location. So we were filming on my flat at the time in Dundas Avenue, and we were shooting in 4 rooms. There was the kitchen, and the kitchen led into a living room. And in the story, Camilla, Anya's character, is supposed to go from the kitchen, walk through the living room, and sit right beside the living room window. And the problem for that is that doesn't exist. So the only window that faced the main street was in a bedroom. So we had to shoot it, and we had to cheat it in such a way to make it look like she's walking through the same room, essentially. So what we did, we shot one way facing the kitchen, and then like we moved rooms and then shot the other stuff and shot about a window, and we cheated it as best we could. Some stuff was slippy just because I think we were running out of time. We couldn't set up lights properly, but like I think everything else works smoothly enough. And then like the corridor itself like was like a one shot type deal, which is it was one of my favorite scenes in the film, was at the ending. And I think one of the ways we approached the edit was like, before this production, I met up with a bunch of actors, met up with a bunch of directors, called anyone I knew could give me a thing. And one of the people I called was a fellow called Andrew Tohill, who is a professional editor, and he also directed a feature film called The Dig. And I reached out to one of the editing studios here, I think it was Yellow Moon or something like that. And I says, hey, can I I like to meet with Andrew just to talk, ask him questions and stuff like that. And they're like, well, Andrew doesn't work here, but we know of him, so we're just gonna pass this on to him. And then Andrew got in contact with me, and we met up, and he gave a lot of advice. One of the points of advice was making shots look interesting and stuff like that. For example, the shot where Camilla opens the fridge and the camera's in the fridge. That was his idea. So I put that in, and then one of the things he said, I asked him a bunch of directing questions, but I also made sure to ask him a bunch of editing questions, because that's his that's his job. So I asked him it's my first time ever working with another guy editing a project that I've written, directed, and stuff like that. How do I work with him? And he says, what do you do is you just give him all the stuff, and then you just let him cook for a while, and let him see what his draft looks like, because it'll probably not be what you're looking for, but it'll give you some insight, oh, this is what it could be. And I think I let you cook, and then I got bored, so I edited one of my own versions of the film. So I had one cut, you had one cut, and then we just watched each other's cuts. And I think for the most part we were on the same page. I think for example the finale, we both picked the same take. And then I think one of the big takeaways I got from your one is because whenever Anya enters the kitchen to speak to Kenny, I was originally had a wider shot of it, But you convinced me to use this like very tight, 15 millimeter angle shot on her, and I was like, why use that shot? And I was like, well, with this angle and this position, it kind of looks more like, intentional, because it wasn't intentional in the beginning. We had to change lenses because Sean's actions in the scene was he was banging a fridge, and Tom the camera op was standing right beside him. So whenever Sean was fucking going ham on the fridge, his elbow dashed the camera and almost knocked it out of Tom's hands. So Tom's like, okay, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a step back. I'm gonna change lenses so it looks tighter on Anya. So I'm further away, but it looks like we're close up. So we just did that incidentally, and it just turned out to be a really, really nice shot. And you liked it, and you convinced me to use it.
Yeah.
And it looks great. It looks like
the recent. Yes, yeah, no.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I just to hone on I think the reason we really went for that tighter one there was, as you said, there was an intentional feeling behind it. We really followed her into the room, and I think we had to play into that because I think we were missing some of the start of the scene from Sean's angle.
Yeah, I forgot to shoot some of Sean's coverage for his first line because we didn't have a first AD, so we didn't I was directing and doing scheduling at the same time, which is not I wouldn't recommend doing that. But we that's clean forgot to shoot Sean's coverage.
But it didn't matter because it felt so intentional. We didn't need to look at Sean during any of those lines. It was totally about her approach to him. Yeah. Camilla's approach to Kenny, and then when we go, we'll talk about the Sean bit, the edit of that climax, because I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, and I think so it's that, and I think one of my big pushes for the film was two things. I think I shot a lot of coverage of the window stuff because I kind of wanted I think the best reference for what I was the energy I was going for. If you see that Bo Burnham bit, it's welcome to the internet, where he's the camera's positioned different ways and he's kind of turning to it constantly, but it's cutting on the movement. And I thought it's a long monologue, and if it was just a locked off shot and it's just her talking, you could be entertained by what she's saying, but visually you'd kind of get turned off. But the fact that she's she's moving her head, and we're cutting on the movement, and it's we're in different positions. Visually, it's always you're the viewer's always engaged. So you're never you're never look at your phone or do any of that stuff, because there's always if you blink you'll miss something. So that's one of the main reasons I want to do that. It gave some energy to the sequence as well, especially given what's happening outside, just a brothel being raided by police.
Yes.
So I thought that added a fun chaotic element to it. And that's what I pushed for. I was very insistent on cutting on movement because I think it looked more fluid that way.
It was a tricky part to edit, especially in my first hack at it without really having listened to your vision for it entirely before you kind of gave me your detailed notes on that scene. It was really a puzzle because it's a difficult thing. You're looking at her from three angles, all from the same three shot sizes, all from the same angle. Which aren't necessarily exactly the same in terms of continuity. So you're just looking for those little head turns or those movements with the bottle coming up or coming down to connect
the movement,
any two shots together. Because otherwise you get a sort of axial cut in, and it's much easier to notice things that are discontinuous within those two shots. So that was the initial problem. But I think
we just had
we came to the philosophy.
We had a detailed back and forth. What helps is I think when I recall, I watched your edits, and I always made sure to say this is what you're doing well, because I think I've been in a position like that where I just tell you do this, and it kind of gets I'm not, you kind of feel underappreciated. So I always wanted to make sure I always praise you're doing well here. And you give a bit of sugar before you give a fuck ton of salt. So but I always I made sure to give what I want, but I also want to explain the reason why I want it this way. So I gave the time codes, gave what I want to cut on, and I explained why I want to cut on it, if that makes sense. Because it's good because then they'll understand oh, that's why he wants it this way. Or even they'll say oh, that's what he wants is that's why he wants it that way. I know what he's going for, but he could do it in a better way. Or I know what he's going for, but this isn't gonna work. So the fact that if you're able to communicate clearly, you're able to get on the page sooner. And you take the ego out of it and sort of dedicate the entire thing to the piece. You're just gonna get a better product overall, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it was great to actually have some really detailed notes. It's really good to work with a director who is kind of pretty clear on what they want, because that can be the worst thing, is if they just, their answer is I don't know all the time. And I think you had quite a clear sense of how that scene should play out, and I think we kind of came to the philosophy that the shots just needed to play out for as long as they possibly could before cutting, when we're at the window scene. And that works. That sort of cracked the code of that scene, because it made any individual cut way more significant and have more impact, especially when we go between the wider shots into the close-ups on her, which really signified those moments at which the fourth wall is broken and she starts addressing the camera down the lens directly. And that's, so each cut there was this is a signal that we're going between the macro world of that we're beside this window and there's a raid going on next door, and then into her personal commentary. I think that is really impactful. And I was listening again to it today, and you've marked each of those moments with a little bit of sound design, a little swoosh, or a little a little transition that brings us in and out of those moments. I think that it's very effective.
Yeah.
In quite a subtle way.
Because I think the thing with our edit as well, we were just editing the footage without any sound effects. So I think it was kind of difficult for you as well, just because you're editing stuff. And he's like, why is he editing it this way? And I was like, oh no, there's going to be a sound cue there and all this stuff. And you're like, well, that's cool, but could you explain that to me just so I understand what's happening? Which I think is pretty fair, because if you went in this blind, you just think, okay, she's sitting by a window and there's flashing lights. What's that about? Type of thing. But yeah, there's a sound played a big influence on it. So I try to make note of what's going to happen in that scene just to keep you in the loop. But yeah, there's I think the edit was pretty interesting. We used most of the stuff we shot angles wise. I think there's only a few shots we didn't use just because they looked they didn't seem relevant. And I think there's one wide shot we dumped, which poor Lucy spent so long putting the set deck for that living room, and then we just dumped that wide shot, which I felt really bad for her, but, yeah, but it's that's the aim of the edit. If your editor would cut the prettiest shot in your film if it doesn't serve the story. And I think you have to be kind of cutthroat in the edit, and you have to be constantly questioning is this does this do anything? Does it contribute? Does it elevate? If we take it out, is there anything missing? If nothing's missing by it being taken out, just leave it out because you don't need it. Even if it's something you feel precious about, if you approach it not even emotionally, I spent so much time there, it meant so much to me. We're just no, does it do anything for the story? Because you kind of have to there was because we watched it hundreds of times, and I think about it the 400th time, I noticed the fucking water bottle and the end of the fucking wide shot, and I was like, Mercer, can you clean that out? Can you do something like that? And I think at some point you decide and says, Des, I think we just watched this thing too many fucking times. You didn't swear, of course, but it was that type of vibe. But there is a thing where a lot of people are only going to watch it once, and you always kind of have to edit, and you always have to make the changes with no one's okay, I've watched this thing 400 times, I know how this thing goes, but what if I've never watched before? Am I able to understand what's happening? Am I able to understand the story? All that type of thing. So, and that's difficult. That's difficult to do, especially if you wrote it. Especially if you know what it's about. It's okay, what if no one? What if you go in blind, not knowing what this thing's about, and you watch it. Like, are you able to like to understand what's happening, type of thing?
Yeah, it's really important to disconnect. That's what's so good about having a director with a separate edit. Being a director who has a separate editor, you have some days at the start to disconnect and then see it in a new light once a cut is put together without you watching all the rushes, and then somehow trying to disconnect from it. One trick I've heard is that if you flip everything horizontally as if viewed in a mirror, you'll immediately see it as like a new scene, and then you can kind of see it for what it is, which is fascinating and worth trying.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So another question: were there any challenges with the edit?
Yeah. Well, we definitely touched some of them. This thing of like a lot of one of the other big draws of the project was there's this implied spectacle of the raid going on outside, and to kind of get the edit in an organic place without, well, I didn't have a sense of how the sound design was going to play out. That was going on in your head, but somehow we had to get the edit to this organic feeling that the sounds would all slot into, and that was initially quite a tricky thing. But I think it all comes down to pace with that, and the scene I want to return to is the Kenny scene between Sean and Anya, where this was more classical in terms of coverage with over the shoulders and different shot sizes on each character, but there was something about the scene that wasn't quite working pace wise. It was meant to feel uneasy and fearful and apprehensive, but I think it was just and it felt all those things because the performances were already there. It was just missing, like, hitting the beats at the right time, and we kind of nailed it down to, it was this moment of the slamming of the doors. Well, actually there were two parts. One was that you steered me in the right direction when we did the first edit. We needed to bring much more pause and silence and longness into the first half of that scene, because the characterization of Kenny needed to be more sort of stilted and awkward, because he's just, that presence of him needs to play out in these kind of long,
So one of
much longer shots.
Yeah, one of the tricks we used was like when like Kenny Camilla asks Kenny, how are things, Kenny? On like there's like in the edit there's a beat, like it lasts for like almost like 5 seconds before, like, you know, Kenny was like, good, you know, he says that on the day that didn't happen, like you know, Anya says like, how are things, Kenny? And then Sean responded immediately. So what we did in the edit was just like, you know, we just had that, took out Anya's dialogue, so it made it look like there's like a giant pause. There wasn't a giant pause, but it made it look like there was a giant pause, and that gave, like, you know, some like more, you know, more ground to pace it out and slow things down. So we pretty much created like beats and pauses where there originally wasn't.
Yeah, we totally compressed and expanded that scene and changed all the pacing to just, because you never really know how it's going to cut, and then, you know, it just gives you the freedom to elongate these moments, and it worked so well that those big awkward pauses for Kenny. And then I think my favorite moment that we edited was the and then when the final slams happen on the fridge, because initially, I think I'm right in saying that there were that in the original performance,
I think there was only
Sean
two
slam
slams.
the door twice. Yeah, we had him slam it twice and say his line twice, and that it wasn't just landing as a moment in the edit, I think. And so we just combined two takes together. We completely, like, you know, what's the word?
Smash burger.
It was an impure. Yeah, it was a smash burger. It was totally impure. We combined two takes of Sean's of slams, and it allowed us to use, I think you and I both had a different idea of which reaction we should use to the slams.
And then we used
Anya's
both.
performance. And we could use both because we'd brought in a third slam. So 3 slams with 2 reactions, and it worked much better because it became a progressive build-up of anger growing.
Alright, because I think it was like started off as a wide and then ended on a close-up. No, like it started off in a wide, ended up in a close-up, and there's a cut of Anya as well, to like at her like reaction as well. And like again, the feeling of intentionality, is that a word? We used the 15mm on like Sean again for that end bit when he's like slamming the thing, and he's like, he's so fucked, and he takes a beat. And he's like, you know what I mean? It's like the sun fucking tonal change. Yeah, like always gets me. But even like that, like those like 5 seconds where he's just kind of like closing his eyes and he's kind of leaning backwards, and you're like, oh, this dude is so like, out of his mind on drugs. Like, he's just not well at all.
It's desperate.
And it is kind of relatable if you've ever been in those scenarios. If you've ever been like that drunk, if you've ever like had like like out of your mind on something. There are moments where you're just like, oh, I can't think, like what's happening to me, type of thing. So that was an interesting shot. I really liked that one.
I think it's extremely powerful, and it's a very desperately sad moment, and it really hits. It's very solid in its pace. You kind of get that rule of 3 slams, and then he backs away, and there's another big long moment of silence as you just like look at a drug addict or a drunk at rock bottom.
Yeah, I think like another editing thing as well, in the kitchen, with not involving Sean, was like when the Camilla takes the bottle out, and then like in the film, I kind of like, when I was writing, I was like, I want to show that she's like a really tough lady who's like street smart and like does a bunch of stuff. And I was like, how do I present that? I was like, why don't she just like use a fridge to open a beer bottle? Like, there's just the edge of the fridge. Because I thought like if someone did that in real life, I'd be like, that's the coolest shit I ever saw in my life. So I thought that'd be pretty cool. And like I think we used for that shot, we used Anya's first take of that, because I think like the way that to me at least, the way the bottle cap fell off felt like more natural. And what I wanted like fridge close and then bottle cap off immediately. And I think like your original edit was like fridge close and then like it's a slight thing where like she just puts the bottle against the thing and then slams it open. I was like, no, I want it like it's gonna like the sound wise it's gonna like smash burger together. It's gonna sound sick if it plays like almost simultaneously. It's kind of like a match cut, if that makes sense, in regards to sound. But yeah, it was that. And that was the best bottle thing. But the only thing is like the walk after was like super kind of slow, so we had to like cut it in half just because it was like way too long. So what we ended up doing is we had like a sound cue midway through, and that acted as a natural cut to like jump to her at the door, essentially.
Yeah.
That's one of the things. And then the what was the other edit thing in the kitchen? No, I think that's the kitchen. And then the finale was easy enough to edit because it was just like one shot. So that's a dream.
If you want to add to the kitchen bit, I think that kitchen moment just shows how easy it is to get away with quite a lot. You'd never tell that those are 2 different takes, and the jump cut is totally hidden in the pace of the moment and the energy of the performance of her taking her hair down. It's a sort of a continue. You get away with an awful lot in the edit, especially when you smooth it over with sound. I think that is the most surprising thing for me every time I edit something, is how it just does not work until you've smoothed over those two clips with some continuous audio, and then you can kind of make quite a lot of things work for you.
Yeah, there's like L cuts, J cuts, that type of stuff. But no, it's good. And I think you also like I think there was like either boom shadow or like a boom and shot at one point, and you completely like removed it from shot, so you did a wee bit of CGI for this as well, didn't you?
Remind me which shot that was.
I think it was maybe one of like the wider ones, maybe when Camilla's coming out the door, or even like when like something like that, or even like a shadow off of her or something like that. Like you kind of keyed it out type of thing.
This is a good moment to talk about Sorry. You can cut all that out. This is a good moment to talk. This is a good moment to talk about, having boomed on set and knowing I was going to edit. I knew what I could get away with on set with the boom. And like, I think it was really important to get as close as possible, especially because you wanted that really tight perspective. I think when Anya looks down the lens and starts directing her commentary straight to the viewer, you need that to be an intimate sound. So we had Matteo in the in the upstairs with a monitor, and he was speaking right into my ear, directing me on the frame lines. I also had the monitor on set, I think. So we had all these sources that were ideal, working towards getting the boom as close as possible to the mouth. And then even so, we were riding that line of the frame the whole time. And what I knew is that because I was editing it, I could get away with any tiny dips, because it would be very easy to simply reframe. We were shooting slightly wider or a slightly taller aspect ratio than we were going to show the film in. So we had a little bit of a safety area to move the frame up and down if the boom ever dipped in a little bit. And similarly, I knew what was possible in terms of any keying or painting out of any bits of boom shadow that did come in. And we had a couple of tricky ones because it was a small house, and there were quite a lot of reflections on the window, various sources. So it's just nice to know that post-production and production are on the same
level,
page. Are on the same page in terms of what can be done, because
it's like so often it's like you fuck up during production, and if you fuck up during production, it's most likely because pre-production was like vastly unprepared. So good pre-production leads to good production, and good production leads to good post-production. It's like, the snake that devours itself. It was good to plan out the shots, just so you have like room for the boom, because there was no like bullshit wide shots where like she's like talking in a big wide room for no fucking reason. It's always gonna be tight on her. You're always gonna see her face. You're always gonna get the performance out of her, and that's what you want. That's what you're gonna need. Yeah,
the performances were exceptional in that film, and they elevated a lot.
That's good. Anya and Sean did fantastic. Yeah. We're running low on time, so I have a last question for you. Any advice, or repeat? Is there any advice you would give your former self about editing?
I'm still very much in the throes of like trying to learn. I'm still very much in the throes of trying to improve as an editor. And I think there are a couple of things that might have benefited me earlier, but one key thing is I think I'd wish I'd started learning earlier a wider variety of software. It would have given me a few more tools when working with different people who like to work on different workflows. I'm very deep in the Adobe route of editing software. I'm quite proficient with Premiere and After Effects, but if you put DaVinci in front of me, I would struggle with Resolve. So
because even the DaVinci supposedly does offer like, if you're used to Premiere, we'll just like make it look like Premiere, but it never does. No.
So editing software is quite different, but just having a slightly wider tool set, possibly learning Avid as well, paying a bit more attention to learning Avid at uni. I probably should have done that, because that would be a useful thing, especially in higher end stuff. Not that I'm pursuing higher end editing work, but that is quite important. And then the other thing I think is that I would say to anyone who is editing, there's a lot of editing work available, especially in the commercial or online world. And it's a profitable area. And I think it's important to realize that what might come naturally to you doesn't necessarily come naturally to someone else. And therefore you have a skill set that people are willing to pay for. And within those commercial circles, it's really good to know what your value is. Especially working with clients who are not in the film world and are looking for, video content. I think that's just a good thing in all areas, but that would be my experience of early editing. value yourself well.
Perfect. Fantastic. Well, Mercer, I think we're running out of time. I just want to say thanks so much for coming on board. Thanks so much for being a part of Showtime. Thanks so much for editing, and thanks so much in general.
Thank you. I look forward to the next one.
Well, that was my interview with Mercer. I hope you all enjoyed it. There are more interviews with cast and crew yet to come. Thank you all for listening, and goodbye.